Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Keys family. I am excited about our guest today. We've had a conversation or two at this point, and I think you all are in for a treat. My hope is that you have your notepads ready because you're about to walk away with some amazing tips. When I talk about keys coming, like this is it. So, welcome, Tatiana. That's our guest today, a Latina mompreneur. She moved from Nicaragua back in, I think, 2014, if I have that right, with your family that has since grown, an international student at Texas A&M with a story to tell, who is now an amazing entrepreneur, works in the marketing space, and has so much to share with us. Welcome, Tatiana.
Thank you. I am extremely excited to be here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit in what's about to unfold. So let's dive in. I guess first, I kind of like touched on, you a little bit, but tell the people who you are, tell our community what you do.
Yeah, so I am a Latina, born in Costa Rica. I call myself an international, like, where am I from? I'm a little bit from everywhere. So I was born in Costa Rica, grew up in Nicaragua. I come from, my mom is Mexican, my dad is from Nicaragua. So, just a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I got married to a Nicaraguan, and in 2015, after having our son in 2012, we decided to come to Texas in pursuing my husband's master's degree. And since then, the rest is history. We have been in Texas now 8 years, and there's a lot of things that changed through that path, especially coming in from, I had been to the US before, but never had I been with a 2-year-old son,
Right.
So there's, just a lot of things that happened until I am where I got today as an entrepreneur.
Awesome. And yes, I imagine it's very different when you have a toddler, and you're starting anew in a new country. But that just means you have so much more to share, right? Like so many more nuggets and gems to talk about how you deal with that sort of transition. We talked about marketing and you being an entrepreneur at this point. Is that the path you saw yourself taking when you were younger? Like, sort of, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, I absolutely did not see in fact, I don't think digital marketing was a thing when I was younger. So I had always been a creative soul. I love painting. I love art. Actually, high school was very challenging for me because I was never the best student.
Okay.
And I think a big part of that was that my way of learning is very different. I am a creative learner, and I like working and doing things, and then I learn through that. And as schools are taught in a very traditional way that don't consider different types of learners.
Correct.
And so for me, that transition until college was actually very interesting. I did not see myself as a digital marketer, but I always saw myself as a business owner.
Okay.
No idea what that was going to be, but I knew I wanted to be a business owner.
Yeah, so did you grow up around business owners? Because, when I was younger, I saw my parents work a 9 to 5, and I thought, well, that's the path for me, right? They didn't own businesses. We never even talked about entrepreneurship or anything like that. So did you grow up in that space where others own businesses and you thought, that's what I want to do?
Yeah, I actually did. I come from a family of business owners. My dad owned his own business. All my uncles owned their own businesses. My grandfather owned his own business. So I was definitely part of the conversation. And there was a point in my life where I actually doubted if becoming a business owner was something I wanted, or just something that was instilled in my, in my thought process. But I also come from a very sexist environment, not necessarily me particularly, but just the Hispanic, culture in itself, or in general. And so it was very weird for me to see myself as a business owner, because I also was, I was also raised in this mentality of becoming a housewife, right? So it's kind of like a paradox. as I was growing up.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you on that. Um, you touched on something, and I want to dive deeper into that because I think about my both of my children who are creatives, very, very creative, and their unique struggles. One is now an adult, 24 years old. The other one is she'll be 16 in a couple of weeks. And I think about her unique struggles with school and sort of being in this box with this structure and not being able to learn in the way that works best for her. But you then went on to Texas A&M and essentially killed it. I don't know another way of putting it, right? So talk to me about your educational journey. I get the roadblocks initially because you weren't free to think in the way you wanted, but once you hit college, like what did that journey look like for you?
That's a great question. I think it was definitely a journey in which I found what I loved. So I
Mhm.
remember my mom always saying, study what you love doing. And I don't think that we mentioned that enough, even in high school when kids are choosing their careers. I
Yeah.
mean, going into selecting a career, which is going to determine what your 8 to 5 looks like for the rest of your life, even if you're a business owner.
Yeah.
And so and that's not mentioned enough. So I love mentoring students that are making those decisions, because one of the things I ask is, when you close your eyes, how do you look like, what do you see that you are doing in the future? Whatever
Mm.
that looks like. Are you in front of a computer? And based on that, look then for a career that allows you to get there, right? So for
Mhm.
me, my journey was a little different because I realized I saw myself in high school building all of these. I remember doing like group projects, and I would be the person that would design the billboard, let's say, right? Or design
Okay.
these things. Now, it wasn't something where I wish a teacher would have come to me and said, hey, there's a career called graphic design where you can combine the way that information is being communicated to audiences by colors and this and that. For me, it was like, oh, I like drawing. I like colors. And I didn't even realize this was typography and using fonts.
Yes, I
Um,
love it.
so then I decided to go to college, and I started off with the careers in communication, because I remember I told my mom I wanted to study graphic design, and she was like, oh no, that's art. What are you going to do with an art degree?
Mhm.
Um, and even though that's a big misconception, graphic
Yes.
design is kind of like the business of like the artistic communication form of business, like it's so primitive to business communications. And so in my career in communications, there was one graphic design class, and I enrolled, and it was the first time in my whole life that I won an award. They had selected my logo to be used for a whole campaign in the university. And I clearly remember sitting there,
Wow.
and they were going to announce the winner, and I was completely not paying attention because I did not expect my name to be called. And then they call my name, and I am like, oh my gosh, I am good at this. Like, this is the
Yes.
first time that I'm good. And that's when I realized this is what I want to do. Um, Now, obviously, things started to change. I got married. I had my son. I had yet not graduated from my undergrad, and so now I was in a point where I was like, I if I'm going to complete my undergrad, I need to do something that I love, because if I don't love it, selecting, staying up until 1 a.m. doing my homework over taking some rest so that then I can take care of my son is going to be completely a nightmare or
Yes.
impossible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I decided to study graphic design, and that's when everything started to, like, all the pieces came together. And I think the biggest awe moment there was that I just chose to study what I love doing, because at that point I was like, I'm just gonna do what I love.
Yeah. This is exciting. So a couple of things you mentioned, and like I said, I hope everyone's taking notes. A couple of things. So I think about my own daughter who loves to write, and right now she's kind of restricted with what she can write, and confined in that space. But she doesn't even fully realize the different career paths that passion for writing can take. Right. Sort of, like you mentioned, you think about this art degree and sort of how are you going to make money, doing art? Well, there's so many different avenues to take that we just don't talk about. Um, And that was, in my mind when I created this podcast, because I'm thinking there's so many different career paths for students, and we're just not talking enough about it. So you loved this artistic side, you love drawing and coloring, and you then channel that into this lucrative entrepreneurship journey where you're able to create, right? And you actually had someone say, "This is amazing." And you said, "Okay, you know what? Maybe this is it. Like, maybe this is it. I feel good doing it. Someone else likes it. Maybe this is it. And I can support my family doing it." You also touched on something else. And I think about those of us who are moms who have balanced school and families, because that was me at one point, um, even through grad school. So the importance of loving what you do, or else it will impact your studies, it will also impact your family. Like, the key to striking that balance, talk to us a little bit more about that, because I imagine there are other moms out there, other women who are either students now or thinking about going to school, right? Or going back to school to finish that degree. How did you make it work, right? What are the obstacles we need to be mindful of?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of important things that you mentioned. I sat down. First of all, I was married, so my decisions no longer were only mine, and I was a mom, so they needed to
Mhm.
be dependent on a growth strategy that was unified with my husband. So one thing that my husband and I do is we will sit down and plan for the next 5 years, and those plans include what I want to accomplish, what he wants to accomplish, and what we want to accomplish, to make sure that when we're putting ourselves through that, we're doing it in a way that I know this is not my forever. This is just so that we get to that goal, right?
Yeah.
So mindset was huge, because the moment we decided for him to do his master's and move to Texas, I was in the middle of finishing my career. And that was a huge pivot in my day to day, because at that moment I'm coming into the United States. My husband is a visa student. I'm
Hmm.
coming in what's called a dependent. The dependent status doesn't allow you to work or study. So
Oh, wow.
I stayed home and I would cook, clean, do all of that stuff. Now, if you know me, I can't just stay home, cook, and clean. So I started volunteering in places. That's the one thing you're allowed to do. So I would volunteer on my son's daycare and do things like that. But I knew that wasn't me forever. I knew I had a goal that I wanted to graduate. We just prioritized my husband's first,
Hmm.
knowing that that was going to be a year. So we both mentally prepared for that to last a year. And it did. And right after he graduated, he was able to get a job offer by Texas A&M in commerce, and we were able to change our status. So I now went in and I changed it to a visa student, and I went back to school. So I think that a big part of it is just sitting and planning. Like, where do you want to go? And people usually plan for next week, or they
Yeah.
plan what they're going to do today. I
Yeah.
would say plan for 5 years, think big, and think, I want to own a university. That sounds crazy to some people, right? But what do you
Yeah.
need to do to get there? And so, similar to when you're selecting your career, instead of thinking, oh, I want to study biology, instead of that, think about, okay, I want to be a doctor. Well, what type of doctor? Okay, so
Hmm.
now, okay, where do I want to work? Do I want to work in Mass General, in Boston, or what am I aiming for? So that then the
Yeah.
decisions I make can actually help me get there. But most importantly, the mindset, because that's going to be huge. You need to be very strong through those decisions, are going to allow you to stay strong, because you're going to know that even though, okay, I'm a housewife right now, I'm cleaning, doing laundry, and it feels like a task I'm doing every day, I know that's not going to be me forever.
Me
It's a
forever.
phase,
Yeah.
right? So you have to be very strong on that mindset. And then another thing that I would say is, definitely, because you're able to sit down and plan and strategize.
Hmm.
One of the things that was huge for me was planning my day, actually sitting, I use post-it notes. I have them everywhere with all the little things I need to happen. I went into a self-discovery journey, where I realized I love color coding and
Hmm.
I love organizing. If it's not in my list, it won't happen. Today, if it's not in my calendar, where
It
it's not,
won't happen.
you
Yes.
know. But I had to get there to discover that that was part of who I was and what I needed to do to get things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would plan. So like right now, even my calendar has a time slot that says mom time because I want it there. I don't want anyone scheduling meetings at that time. That is the time that I'm going to be spent. Now, that doesn't mean that's the only time I'm a mom, right? It
Mm-hmm.
just
Right.
means I get to plan play dates at that time. I get to plan piano lessons if I want to at that time. And I mentally block myself so that I'm not thinking about those meetings because since I love what I do, I'm
Yeah.
always thinking about it, right?
This is so good. I knew this was going to be a great conversation. And even when we talked yesterday, I was like, man, like there's so much more I want to dig into. So we talked about planning and organizing, two things I absolutely love, right? I've spent so much ridiculously amounts of money um on planner stuff, right? Paper planning. And then I realized, okay, I need something a little more streamlined. So I went to a digital planner and my iPad. But you're saying you just grab a sticky note and write stuff down or put it in the calendar, right? Like we don't have to overthink what the planning process looks like. We just need to sit down and do it and not just plan for tomorrow, but be strategic and think through our 5-year goals.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something very important. And I think a lot of us as moms, those that are moms,
Mm-hmm.
or just in general, we overthink things, right? Well, oh my gosh, I did this with my son, and now what is he gonna do when he grows up? Is he gonna remember this? So a big part of what I do, like a mantra that I have, is just do it, right? And
I love it.
I made that up, by the way. I'm just kidding. But
Listen, claim it as your own. No one's gonna say.
right. But a big part of it is just doing it because at the end of the day, and it feels and sounds very cliche, but if we overthink it, it won't happen. And the most important part of it is it happening, right? So it's more important for me to get out there and either contact whatever that looks like for my goals than for me to sit down and plan. If planning is taking away a month for you, you're procrastinating, you're not planning.
Yeah. I needed this conversation for me selfishly, as I think through the next 5 years and this self-discovery journey I'm on after recently leaving corporate for the first time in 30 some odd years, right? So all of this is so good. And I'm just thinking about the audience and how timely this information is. Um, Goodness, there's so much I could dig into. So we're talking about strategy, we're talking about goal planning. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the fact that you were an international student doing all of this. You just got to America, what, 2014, 2015. So, what unique obstacles did you face? What hurdles, what challenges did you face as an international student with a family, right, pursuing your education?
Yeah, I'm gonna divide that into two buckets.
Yeah.
Myself as an international student and myself as a mother, because those
Mhm.
were two different challenges but intertwined. As an international student, I knew I wanted, first of all, we have to pay out of state tuition, right? So I needed to overcome cost. I did some research. My husband and I found out that when you have a scholarship in Texas of $1,000 or more, you're instantly allowed to have in-state tuition. So that was my
Oh,
first.
wow.
Yes. And that goes to anyone. It's not only for international students, but international students do apply. Now, during the first year that I was just staying at home, I started to volunteer at a lot of events, right? So I started meeting deans, I started talking to different people involved within the higher ed university where my husband was doing his master's.
Mhm.
And so that allowed me to also start identifying opportunities. Now, because I sat down and planned, I knew that I wanted to then enroll. And so I knew when I was doing all of that, what I needed to look out for, what type of resources would help me get there. Even though I was a year away from it, I
Yeah.
was still aware of where I wanted to go. So I was still, intentionally having conversations that would allow me to be prepared for where I needed to take that step.
Yeah.
So The first step I took was, I think the hardest hurdle was I was coming in with about 60 credit hours, and about 40 credit hours of those were from an international institution. So I had studied for 2 years in Central America. There's a whole process to certifying your transcripts. So I had to go through all of that. Now, the good thing is that because I did it, because I planned, I did it with time. And so I knew what I needed to do and in what, when it needed to be accomplished. I also had to go back to my country to get my visa so then I could come back. So there was a whole kind of like transition between identifying the immigration process and then also the application process within the university, right?
Okay.
So it had to be very methodical. Apart from that, as a mother, expenses were going to be a big part of it. So what I did is I became president of the student board of directors for the cafeteria, which allowed me to cover my meal expenses and my son's. And so that way, now I had meal covered because I sat down and I said, okay, I have, I'm going to need scholarships. What am I going to do with food? What am I going to cook? And by the way, I was coming from a country where I had never cooked. Like I had no idea I didn't know how to do laundry.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. How is that possible?
There's a lot of help in Nicaragua. So I grew up with, people that would do that.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So I came very, very lack of knowledge on basic things that that people here already know about. So I had never done our laundry. There was always someone that was helping us with that. And so I had to figure out the basic stuff and then also the other type of things.
Wow. This story just has me like repeatedly like, wow. The whole piece about covering meals, right, for you and your son, right? You figure it out, right? You do the research, you plan accordingly, and you figure it out. So talk to me about what mentorship has looked like for you along the way. I see you as a mentor, but I imagine along the way, you've also had mentors that have just really poured into you and encouraged you. Because as you speak, I don't hear someone who knows limits, right? Like if there's something I want to do, I can absolutely do it, right? Where does that come from? And talk to me about the mentorship piece.
Yeah, that's such a great question because I think students and people in general, they don't take advantage of the concept of mentorship enough.
Yeah.
I will say that a big part of how I found these opportunities, because during my undergrad, every university has a scholarship portal. I went into the scholarship portal. I think that from the 100 scholarships, let's say 100%, maybe like 20%, international students can apply to. So it's a very small percentage. Wow. They have limitations. So in that 20%, I applied and I received 7 scholarships, which absolutely covered the cost of tuition. So if I, as an international student, was able to find those resources, how, like it's there, we just need to look for them. Even the cafeteria, it's about showing up. But a big part of it was mentorship. And I think, for me, mentorship started since young. My mom and my dad had always they've been great mentors, even as in my marriage, they became our mentors in my marriage as well. But actually listening to what people are telling you and picking what is the right path for you, right? So like I remember asking for advice and being very confused to like, but that's not really what I want to do. But there's something there. There's something there that I can listen to. Now, I feel very blessed to the university where I went to, because that university is fully focused on mentorship. So if, before going there, I would consider my parents my mentors. And after going there, every dean that I met would become a mentor to me. Wow. And I think that that's not common in a lot of universities. I actually started off going to Pennsylvania for my undergrad before I got married. And I never met the president. I don't think I ever met the dean. And yet then I went to Texas A&M in Commerce, and I had met all the presidents that were there when I was there. I was invited to, these dinners that were international students were invited to. And so it was all about just being comfortable with getting out there and just asking questions, and having people that are interested in that growth in others. So like a big mentor for us Her name is Dr. Mary Hendricks, and she allowed us to really think in a different way. She gave us all of these, she opened the doors to understanding all these resources that are there, not only for us, but for, you know, minority students, for students in general, mothers. And so for me, that's a big part of who I want to be today, because if we're not there sharing all this information that we know, then people won't find it out, right? And then even in business, now I have, you know, my business partner, JC Hyde, he is one of my mentors, in terms of also thinking big, identifying the next steps. I think that mentorship is something that should always be there, no matter the path that you're in, or how big you feel you are, you know?
Formal and informal mentorship, I imagine, right? Like spoken and unspoken. I think sometimes we overthink what that looks like. And it's like, it doesn't have to be a formal agreement, right? Like mentorship is so broad and so needed. And sometimes all it takes is for you to put yourself in the right space and open your mouth and talk to someone about what you want to do, right? Talk to them about your goals, and kind of how you see your career or your education progressing. And even if you don't have that vision yet, right? That's what a mentor is for, right? To say, this is what I enjoy. I love coloring. I love drawing, right? What could that be? Someone somewhere is going to say, you know what? Typography, right? Like there's a whole market for someone to, you know, create fonts and graphics and all of this amazing stuff. And again, that's why, you know, this podcast exists, to have those conversations, because someone somewhere is listening and say, you know what? My college student really likes drawing and can't quite, you know, get into history, science, and all this other stuff that, you know, he's required to take. So what does that look like? Like, I love this. Oh, this is exciting.
You know, I think it's important to add here that the concept of mentorship, it's so vague, because people usually consider a mentor someone who's very successful in business. Like, you think of a mentor and you think about, you know, one of the guys in Shark Tank. The reality is that a mentor is somebody who can guide you through the different paths and help you make those decisions. Like, if I look back through my whole journey, for me, I've been very blessed for my, you know, the main mentor in my life has been my husband. And I feel blessed that it's been him, but for other people, it could be their friend. But it really has to be someone who propels you to achieve that, you know, who really tells you, no, you got this, you can do it. Because if you're not, if you don't believe in yourself and you don't surround yourself with people that believe in you, then there's no way you're going to be able to, you know, achieving those smaller goals to get to the bigger ones are going to feel crazy.
That's good. That's good right there. Like, if you don't see it in yourself, surround yourself with people who see it in you. Because that's, I think, one of the keys to success for sure. Gosh, this is so good. I could keep going, right? Like this is exciting. And it makes me think there's part 2, there's part 3. So what do you do now? You know, you focus on marketing, you talked about one of your business partners. What does that look like in your day-to-day now? And how has your education lent itself to being successful in your current space?
Yeah, so I in 2017, I looked at my educational path. 2017, I had yet not graduated from my undergrad, but I was studying graphic design. Graphic design is a 5-year career. It's actually a year longer than traditional undergraduate careers, visual communications. And I realized I want to have another kid. Like, I need to sit down and think if this is what I want to do. Where is this taking me? And is that where I want to go? So I did some research. I had about 80 credit hours, and I changed my career into liberal studies so I could graduate faster. Liberal studies is a little bit more of a interdisciplinary career where you get to choose different approaches. And initially I had toyed with that idea, but I was like, no, if I want to be a successful graphic designer, I need to graduate with a BFA. Well, it turns out that that's not true. And
good to know.
Yeah.
You're saving someone money, right? And time.
Right. Yeah. No, and it's more about strategy. So like I sat down, I was like, what do I want to do? Like, do I want to be in New York working for a big, graphic design firm and even though that was interesting to me, I also wanted to have a balance with my life, with my being a mom, a wife. So I decided to graduate, and I realized by the time I graduate with my undergrad in liberal studies, and do my master's and have a kid, I would still yet be completing my undergrad in visual communications.
Wow.
So I planned, and I do think that, you planning got laughs, and it is true, but at least you got to have some, direction. So
Yes.
I changed my career, and 6 months later, I graduated. And then I had my daughter. I stayed with her for 6 months. So by that time, it's been a year and a half, right? And then I went on to do my master's. And in 2020, I had my master's in marketing and my undergrad in liberal studies, with about 4 years of graphic design because I had transferred so many times. And so then I started to realize, when I was doing my master's in marketing, that I believe there has to be more of an obvious synergy between the industry of digital marketing and the industry of graphic design. Nowadays, marketing is done in a less traditional way, and it's so much more dynamic, and it's something that really needs to catch the attention of the user, right? So in essence, it should be completely intertwined with graphic design, but it's not. So we're creating all of these digital marketers who have no knowledge in graphic design, and we're creating all of these graphic designers who sometimes are not entirely aware of functionalities and things for tracking and things like that, right? So I started my business, which combined those two. And today we merged with Height. I am the owner of Height Digital Dallas. We launched a franchise model. We opened 22 locations in the US. And alongside my business partner, JC Height, I co-founded our creative department, which initially was a company on its own, Height Creative, and now it has merged into Height. So in there, we have scaled from 3 employees to 22 in the last year. Over 200 projects in itself over the last 6 months. And so it's been an interesting journey, but I think the most interesting side of it has been that I realized that even though I do love graphic design and I love the career path I've chosen, what I love the most is the people I work with. Like, that really nurtures my soul. The idea of helping other moms. In Height Creative, for example, all of our managers are female. That was not intentional, but it happened. And
I love it.
80% are mothers, and we get to have these conversations where it just fills my soul when they tell me I had never been in a job where I feel treated like a human. And it's crazy. That should not be a thing, but that's what my journey looks like today. And to think that it started with me moving to Texas 8 years ago, it's just crazy.
It's not crazy. It's according to plan, right? This was the plan, and you executed on that. And I am encouraged, and I think that's something that we often miss, right? Once you hit a point in this journey of success or work or career, you'd be surprised how many people you encounter, just if you have a conversation, who encourage you, right? To just like find your purpose, right? Discover what you really enjoy doing, discover what brings you joy, and pursue it, right? Like, this conversation has been so energizing for me. There I go, thinking about me again. But I'm serious, right? People look at me and think, oh, she's successful, but I'm still looking to others sometimes for that energy and that, like, yes, Christina, stay the course, right? And you just delivered that. I am beyond appreciative. And I know this will impact our communities, right? Because we're aligned when I think about our missions. The impact to the community from this conversation is so great. I can't thank you enough. I truly can't. And I mean that genuinely, because it was much needed. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That has, like, for me, there's no purpose behind doing anything that I do if I can't share it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, considering the fact that we call this show The Keys to the Office, um, tell me one major key you could share with our community today that would sort of put them on the right path to success.
I would say that instead of focusing on the right now,
Mhm.
focus on the 5 years from now. And by the way, that needs to be a dynamic exercise, because once 5 years come by, you're going to have to do it again.
Yeah.
And that was eye-opening to me, because I had this plan of graduating with my undergrad. I did it. So then I went into my master's. I did it. So then I opened my business. I did it. And then I was like, okay, so what's next?
Yeah.
I'm 20, now I'm 30. I was 29 and I was like, what are my goals now? Well, that exercise needs to continuously be happening, even though those goals keep getting crazier and crazier.
Yeah.
That just keeps the excitement rolling. But one thing that we tend to forget is when we're living in the right now, we feel like we're never going to be moving towards our goals. And we forget that those little things we're doing are helping us get there. So I would just say, definitely the sit down and think about where you want to go. And then ask yourself, is what I'm doing now helping me get there? And that could be, I mean, if you want to save for a car, what are you doing right now to be able to save for that car?
Right.
Just the small things that really help you get there, that sometimes are so small and so annoying because they become part of the day to day, that we get lost in them, like
Yeah.
cooking
Yeah.
and cleaning for that whole year. I remember being like, this is eternal,
For that whole year. I love it. I love it. How can we find you? How can we support you? How can we make sure we stay connected and sort of feed off of your energy?
I am very active on Instagram. I share a lot of advice between my personal journey and my professional journey.
Mhm.
So there, you can find me on Instagram. I also have my LinkedIn. And then I also love to mentor students. So if there's availability, I have a calendar where they can book me for 15 minutes and I can guide them through any decision. It's part of who I want to be. So I make time for it.
I love it. Thank you again, Tatiana. This has been amazing. Like, I'm gonna wipe this smile off eventually. But for now, I'll keep it. This has been phenomenal, and I'll certainly have to have you back. Even to talk about, I guess, in more detail, that 5-year planning. Ooh, that's exciting. Um, and the details of that. Like, now I want to know more. But you all certainly follow Tatiana. Make sure you stay connected. She's truly impacting our community. So thank you. And this has been great. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I can't thank you enough for having me here and doing this for all the students and mothers and anyone who is, interested in learning more. There's so many opportunities for minority students, so many opportunities for any type of person that is wanting to go back to school, that is wanting to start their own business, that we don't necessarily know it's out there. And so it's all about finding people like you and I who are involved in the community, who have been there before, to just share
Yeah.
share the resources.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, dear. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
You too.
Bye bye.